Morning, everyone. It's exciting to be here and great to have a chance to talk to David. I think Phil mentioned this. This is the third year we're doing this, which means that the first time we did it was literally about 7 or 8 months after GPT was released. And the first question we were trying to answer is, what is it? Why is it important? What's the big deal about it? The next time we did it, we actually partnered with Tech Investment Banking, made it more of a client event, and talked about how enterprises can, potentially adopt that technology. And then today, I think we're talking about, scaling and how enterprises can scale with Gen AI, but also talk a lot about the technology developments, which has been, taking place at breakneck speed over the last 2.5 years. And I think, David, you can address a lot of these topics. David Griffiths is the Chief Technology Officer at Citi. He has been for over a year now at this point, held a number of other leadership positions prior to that. But interestingly, for this discussion, you've been at the catbird seat in terms of seeing what's going on out there with respect to Gen AI, speaking to all the key players. So we're excited to get your perspective today about the state of the technology, as well as how Citi is thinking about adopting it and so on. From the last time to this time, I think we have already seen huge strides that the tech organization has made in terms of launching Citi Stylus, Citi Assist, Citi Squad, 3 different products that are rolled out globally or actually quite at scale, and we'd love to hear about that as well. So maybe that's a good place to start, David, which is, it's been about 2.5 years. It's, going back 2.5 years and starting on our Citi's own journey, maybe give us a little bit of a retrospective on sort of what that felt like, what the vision was, and where we are today.
Thank you, and great to see everybody here today. And yes, 2.5 years has flown by, I think it's fair to say. And I think if we wind the clock back 2.5 years ago, and we look at some of the numbers that have been on the screen that Phil took us through earlier in terms of the explosion of investment, I think it all started when you looked at generative AI, and it was the tremendous versatility of the technology. I remember some of the early demos, of course, great as a coding assistant, but then there's some phenomenal early OpenAI demos on using OpenAI models to help you respond to insurance queries. And it's thinking, well, this is the same model that's underpinning this. So, given we're a bank, we're a very global bank, and banking is a digital business. Everything we do is moving digital information from one place to another and creating more digital information about that digital information. So generative AI was going to help us everywhere. It was just pretty clear. So we were fortunate in that we had a very capable engineering cohort that we could bring to bear on the problem. And we've executed pretty relentlessly since then. And I think, actually, in many ways, the journey of 2.5 years is taking us to this point of agentic AI. We talk a lot about it recently, but it was very clear 2.5 years ago this was the path we were on. You could get out of the models at that time, things like auto GPT that could do primitive instruction, creation, tool calling. Wasn't reliable enough. Models weren't quite capable enough, but they are now. So that journey has just matured. So this is why we're all talking about agentic AI now, because ignore all of the hype, the rubber can hit the road with this technology, and that's really the journey we started on 2 years ago, and we're very well placed now with some of the capabilities that you've described.
Yeah, that's excellent. And we do want to sort of double click on agentic AI a little bit later on in the conversation. But just going back to Citi Stylus, Citi Assist, now available to over 150,000 employees. What has been the most surprising or impactful use cases you have seen? What have been the general lessons learned that we can share about adopting these technologies in a large organization like ours?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and actually, it's not one thing. It's the fact that there are so many things that's so interesting. People do everything from like helping analyze legal obligations, legal terms, right through to taking a PowerPoint and creating JIRA stories from it. So again, it's the versatility of the technology. And you can go to 10 different parts of the bank and find 10 different, very varying use cases of the same tool, the same technology, each adding value in its own way. And I think what's nice about what we're seeing and what we've done is that people operate with the front end, at the UI level, but also at the API level too. So you've got this stack of solutions that all evolve off the same technology underpinning. So, and that's been exciting. I mean, many of the things that people are doing weren't in a spec that we wrote at the beginning. They are things that people have figured out for themselves with the tools that we've provided. So I think it's the sheer breadth and variety that's most interesting and is like justifies the strategy and that initial belief that this tool was, helpful in a very general sense.
And one of the things that's been exciting to us as investors, but in the industry, is the fact that in financial services, this technology can be used front end to back end and everywhere in between, right? Just sort of the how it can permeate into the enterprise when used properly and responsibly, right? And that's been exciting to see that there's initial inroads in all different parts of the organization. In terms of sort of just the architecture and engineering principles, I mean, how do you think about sort of scaling Gen AI at a company like Citi? Complex environment, regulated environment, on the ground in over 100 countries, so there's the geographic aspect of it. What are some of the considerations and what are some of the choices you've been making?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's straightforward actually. You've got to keep it simple. Really got to keep it simple. It doesn't always make us popular, but there can only be one is very much the heart of our strategy here. And the reason for that is if you've got one thing, then you've got one thing to approve, one thing to secure, one thing to create training around, and to focus the company's resources on. Now, of course, there are 100 different ways of solving this problem, and we're a very big company, and we have 100 brilliant ideas a day, which would all be viable if we let them all flourish, but we have to focus the company's resources. So that's very much the heart of it. And because we kept it simple, we could navigate all of the approval conversations efficiently, and looking for speed of decision making around approvals. Like, yes is a great answer with an approval, but no is actually fine too, as long as you get it quickly and with a reason.
Right.
And it's much easier to have those conversations if you've got one simple thing that you're talking about. And then it is scale. We've really looked to scale as quickly as possible so we can learn, see what people are doing with the tools. And the stylus that we have out there today is completely different to the stylus we had just 5 months ago.
Right.
And in 5 more months, I suspect it will look different again. So, but that's a function of us seeing what people are doing, bringing the feedback in and iterating.
And so much of the work has been in terms of identifying what are those highest impact use cases that the technology is a fit for, right? And then choosing that and investing there rather than trying to sort of somehow peanut butter spread investments all over the place, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge risk of distraction with this. And, you can easily go down a rabbit hole and create a very complicated solution for a very niche problem. And the challenge with that is the frontier is advancing so quickly. The technology is moving so quickly. If you fixate on a complicated and extended build, the technology world will have moved around you. So that's why it is important to be very focused. And if you are going to do something, do it fast and get it out there. Don't sit on things and spend 6 months developing because the world is moving too quickly.
Right. Which in fact brings us to the topic of sort of what we as an organization have done about adoption. I mean, most recently, 3 of the senior leaders have come together to sponsor sort of adoption and accelerate the adoption. I know we also have the Citi AI accelerator model across all of our businesses and functions. So maybe you could comment on that a little bit, David, on sort of that approach that Citi's been taking.
Yeah, no, it's and the Citi accelerators are proving to be a really key ingredient in the strategy. And I think as Tim Ryan often says, this is just as much about the people as is the technology. And it's very obvious, but it's really true. And so what we have is the AI Accelerator Program is 2,500 very enthusiastic early adopters of the technology across Citi, who will go and just send the message and get people excited about what you can do. We definitely saw in the early days, you create this amazing tool, you put it on people's desktops, and you say, our work is done. Of course it isn't. It takes seeing, learning, doing experimentation, and that there is a certain virality that you need from having the person next to you using the tool and saving themselves half an hour in a day. It's like, well, I'm going to do that too.
Right.
So the accelerators spread that message, and they share their stories. So we curate videos of what people are doing, examples, POCs, things like this. And it's happening because people move then from being fearful into being excited and realizing that technology isn't, threatening. It's just going to save you some time. So use it.
Right. And it sounds like, even within our own team, we're starting to see, more and more usage of the tools, which is exciting. And then, of course, when you bring in more tools, it obviously will increase adoption as those get rolled out. Switching gears a little bit and going back to the agentic topic, maybe talk a little bit, David, about sort of the state of the state with agentic. Obviously, it's been sort of the term du jour for a little while now. Yeah. And tell us about sort of your views of agentic AI and then how it might sort of come and influence the banking industry as a whole, if not just Citi.
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting time. And I think it's, as I said at the beginning, we're finally seeing us arrive at the destination we've all wanted to head to for 2 years. And we're here. So if you look particularly at the developer space, agentic capabilities are helpful. They're genuinely helpful. They're not a novelty that you can run and will work one time in 10. They can't do very, very complicated things yet, but they can do simple things. And we do simple things frequently in a company of this scale. So for developers, agentic space is the time is now. I mean, of course, you've got things which are heading towards an agentic paradigm more from an IDE-first paradigm. So we're definitely going to see, for us in the next 6 months, significant benefit from agents for developers. And then beyond that, we're starting with developers because the models are all very optimized for coding at the moment, and everyone's racing toward those coding benchmarks. So when now you have the reasoning, the reliability in the models intrinsically, and the coding ability, and just a better understanding of generative AI, we're ready for developers. And the next thing that will definitely come, and we're seeing it happen, is things in operations. So less sort of developer-centric workflows, but still structured workflows. So helping respond to client queries, of course, helping anticipate what a client needs from an email, staging it, moving through a multi-step workflow. Lots of products coming to market there. Things like Writer is a really interesting sort of tool in that space, and that will happen. I mean, my one sort of worry is that it all ends a bit RPA-like. Because there's, some agentic AI that we see is just RPA. And RPA was not a tremendous success for the industry. Right. But you can see logically why it's different. RPA fails because workflows, it was too brittle. RPA's failed in exceptional circumstances. Of course, LLMs and AI now are more versatile, more adaptable. So it gives us hope that this is not just RPA in the operations space, but we're going to have to be very disciplined about how we build it, who maintains it, who's accountable, and who runs it. And then beyond that, certainly in the sales, analyst, sort of banker support, some really, really cool use cases coming to fruition there. I would say agentic AI in any kind of client-facing situation is great opportunity, but also a huge risk. We hear a lot about AI slop now, flooding social media, flooding the internet. Well, the very worst thing that we could do is hit our customers with low quality AI content. They'll just disengage. So I think there'll be a lot of things that we will look at in the sales and marketing space that we'll think, well, we could, but then I think we'll say, well, should we? Is that really going to result in a great client experience? So we need to be very thoughtful in that interface between us as a company and our clients when it comes to agentic AI. Right. But if for internal operations, it's an absolute no-brainer. Right, and I think that the point about RPA is a good one, right? And hopefully there are lessons from RPA that can be applied here to sort of make it go much more smoothly, which I think starts with sort of having the right expectations on what it can and cannot do to begin with.
Maybe switching gears a little bit again and talking a little bit about sort of how we have partnered with some of the big tech companies, maybe even some of the smaller ones.
And look, we're continuing to see, as I said at the beginning, the frontier advance, and there's no sign of that slowing down. I would say with any company that we work with, an important aspect is composability. We're at such a scale, it is very unlikely we're just going to buy sort of one tool or one platform and deploy it to everyone everywhere. It's much more about, well, we have a particular need, whether it's internal search or whether it's a high-speed distributed cache or something like that. And we would like to buy those things and bring them into our strategy. We wouldn't want to go like tool first when it comes to a strategy. So for us, I mean, it's not the same for many other enterprises, but for us, that's really important.
Great. And then maybe the last question, and maybe we have a minute or two for a couple of questions out there from the audience. What advice would you give to other large organizations that are also getting into this journey? Maybe they're started more recently than us. What are some of the thoughts there, David, that might be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it already, so I will emphasize. Keep it simple and do it fast. Right, it would be the piece of advice. And the thing to avoid, and again, I have covered this, but don't get too complicated. The world is moving too quickly, and enterprises like us are very good at doing very complicated things over multiple years. And now that is not the approach to take with this technology. So yeah, keep it simple, do it fast, and scale it.
Excellent. Well, we have a couple more minutes, so if there are a few questions from the audience, I think it would be great for David to.
Sure.
Yeah. Over there.
Thank you very much. Good morning. William Beer from Accenture. Just wanted to ask you, David and Arvind, what are your thoughts on some of the security aspects of these technologies? Because there seems to be a lot of unknowns, and I'd be very interested in your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, great question, and there are many dimensions to this. Both the exposure that you can potentially have from using a generative AI model. Data leakage, whether you're extracting information from the model or you're sending it to a provider that you don't trust. Of course, there's a whole list of vectors. Prompt injection, of course, is no secret. So there is an entire ecosystem naturally, as there should be, around Gen AI-centered security that is springing up that we're very engaged with. What was interesting is when we started to look at this a year and a half ago, we quickly realized we were building things we just didn't want to. It was going to get too complicated too quickly. So we did buy some very early stage Gen AI security capabilities that are now maturing nicely. But absolutely, that was a complement to our existing cyber toolkit. And then, of course, you've got the other side of it. Gen AI is a support to external threats in terms of and we get millions of phishing emails, and as you can imagine, every day. And the quality of those attacks is definitely getting better. So our cyber teams are absolutely investing in the defensive capabilities to protect against this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's very much top of mind.
Thanks, David. You referenced this a little bit in terms of the tools that we bring into the firm versus building internally for a more specific use case.
Yeah, it's the build versus buy decision making has been an interesting one as a CTO over the past 2 years. Initially, actually, it was quite easy because there weren't many enterprise-ready capabilities for us to buy. It was very much a case of we had no choice. We're now at the point where we've probably got some things that we built that we wouldn't if we started today, because, and happily, the ecosystem and many people here today have brought these products to market. So what's going to be very interesting for us over the next year or two is actually what do we just pull back on and start to jettison because we've invested in it. We have our own sort of agentic frameworks internally, and actually now are things beginning to mature enough that we can stop to invest in that or invest in it less. Many sort of things like this. We made some conscious decisions. For example, we didn't bring in any of the very native vector databases early stage. We had lots of conversations, but then thought, well, actually, it's probably a complexity we don't need, and we know that our existing providers will meet the need there, as indeed they have done. So yeah, that's an important part of things. But like I say, you know, we've looked at many sort of options here, but it's important that whatever we do buy fits in with a strategy that we own and is very like sovereign to us. And that really will determine our buying decisions now and in the future. Does it align with our strategy and where we're going?
Great. I think we're out of time, so this was excellent. Thank you, David.